This meeting is also being recorded so that friends can watch it if they are not here.
In our time together last year, I think everybody on the call was part of Essentials in Action last year. We do have a couple of people who have registered who have used Number Corner in the past and have implemented it in a way that might be a little bit different than we implemented last year. But we welcome all voices into the room. So we're so excited to have all of you with us. Last year in our year of learning, we focused on the essentials, 3 essentials that are on the screen and 3 values that are on the screen. This year, we'll continue thinking hard about implementation of the essentials, and then our focus will be around recording student thinking.
I love this picture. Up on the screen, you are going to see our teacher and leader learning system for Essentials in Action. If you are a teacher, you probably have not seen this yet. We have a second cohort. So you were our trailblazers in Essentials in Action. And because you guys were so amazing, we are bringing on a second cohort of educators to dabble in Essentials in Action for a second year. You guys are cohort 1, and you can see highlighted in the yellow that here today we are in recording student thinking. Thank you, Trish, for your cursor. Throughout the school year, you guys play a large role in the Essentials in Action project by continuing to implement Number Corner daily, and then engaging in learning around recording student thinking, and then attending recording student thinking artifact clubs, which we're going to learn more about today. Those dates live on the right side of the screen. They also live in an email that was sent to you from Trish this morning, and they will continue to be shared. Trish, what might you add to this slide?
We know and appreciate all of the time that you put in last year to implement and be supported by a leader. This year, the lift is a little bit lighter in terms of the last year you were meeting monthly. This year, it'll be a 4-time participation in an artifact club. It'll still be after school, and Nicole and her team will be leading those sessions with us. We're going to just really think hard about the things that we're doing during Number Corner and how we can support student thinking and sharing of that thinking. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Nicole and her team from TeachingWorks. TeachingWorks is part of the University of Michigan, and we are so pleased to have Nicole and her team partnering with us on this project. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having us. We're very excited to be working with all of you across this year. And thanks for joining in our online adventure today. We do a lot of interactive work, and so we're looking forward to doing some interactive work in an online format with you. My name is Nicole Garcia. I'm here with my team, Nicole Farash and Heather Beasley, and we'll be facilitating your grade level breakouts today, but we're going to start with a little bit of work together in whole group. Okay, so we wanted to start by having everybody do a waterfall in the chat. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to just take a second in the chat and name your favorite Number Corner workout and why you love it, but don't hit enter yet. So just take a moment and type in the chat your favorite Number Corner workout and why you love it. And then when I say go, you're going to hit enter, and so we can see everybody's favorites. Right, take 30 more seconds. And hit enter for me. Okay, so we're seeing in the chat lots of calendar grids, some computational fluency. A few are really loving the number path. Okay, some fact fluency practice is coming up. Okay. Oh, daily rectangle, that's a fun one. Okay, and Molly and Craig, thanks for hanging in there with us. We're excited to have you join us this year. Okay. The second thing that we would love to hear a little bit about is, what do you find most challenging about recording student thinking? So you had a little bit of an opportunity, some of you, to get into some of the pre-work and think a little bit about what that work of recording is. But we wanted to start with, like, what's hard about it, because that's what we're going to be working on together this year. And we do think that it's difficult work. So take a moment, drop in the chat. We're going to waterfall again. So type it in, don't hit enter yet. What do you find most challenging about recording student thinking? Take 30 more seconds. Okay, and go ahead and hit enter when you're ready. So I see timing, I see listening, I see room to record, I see annotating, clutter details, thinking about what's important. Great. Okay. So these are some of the things that we are going to be working on together this year. To get us a little bit oriented to what we're going to be doing today, a couple of things. You can see on the screen all of our session documents for today are going to be located in our Google Drive folder. You can see the link on the screen. I'm going to pop the link in the chat in just 1 second for you. When you get to that folder, I would keep that folder open for today. Just leave that open and bookmarked. You're going to see August session materials. That will be where our work for today is. And you'll be able to navigate to that folder, and you're going to see a few things in there. One is the session Zoom links. Okay, so if you get bumped off at any point today, you can come back to that document and you can rejoin the Zoom there. We have this session as our main session where we're all together. There are also links for each of the individual grade bands. Grade 2 is going to stay on here with me. The other grade bands are going to go to other links so that we can more easily use breakout rooms to allow you to work together, to talk to one another, and to collaborate. Okay. You'll also see folders for each of the grade bands for today, and that's where your documents will be. Okay. When we're together in this online setting, please do us a couple of favors. One, if you could change your name so it matches what you like to be called, that would be great. Sometimes people have kind of like shortened names because it's your username, but it would help us out a lot if you could change your name so that we know who you all are and what you like to be called. You all already are, but please make sure you're muted when you're not sharing. Sometimes there's really loud background noise. When we're in our breakout rooms, it would be really great if you could turn your cameras on. That just helps people be able to talk to one another. You don't have to do it in a whole group where we're doing a little bit of kind of like orienting. I know everybody's internet is not great. And so if you need to keep it off because of internet issues, please just let us know. But when we're working in small groups, it's much nicer to be able to see one another. We are going to be doing some work where you're going to be recording on paper, okay? And the only way that that works for you to be able to share with other people is if you turn your background off. I don't want you to stress about your background, right? You can see mine is not great. Don't worry about it, but it does need to be off for you to be able to hold your recording up for other people to see. Otherwise, everything just disappears. So you can toggle back and forth. If you're not feeling great about people seeing your background right now, that's totally fine. But when we need to do some sharing, just make sure you turn your blur or that background off. Okay. The other thing that we're going to ask is, I know that many of you have done work online before. It's really helpful for us to help us to read the room if you're participating in the way that you would do in person, right? I know it's really hard when you're at a computer screen and you're looking at things, but if you can help us out by coming off of mute and talking the way that you would in whole group when we're having those conversations, that would be really helpful for us. Okay. So our goals together today are really to work on how public records of student thinking support learning. And we're going to be digging in each of our content areas into particular ways of recording, using certain representations, and we're going to dig into some number corner activities. And we're really going to think about how the different representations that we use, things like 10 frames, number lines, etc., how representing that content using those can help to really build student understanding, their conceptual understanding, right? And then we're going to do some preparation together. So we're going to spend a large chunk of our time in our grade bands preparing to record thinking in a number corner activity that you're going to try out coming up. Okay, so something that's happening in your September number corner activities. Okay. So our agenda for today, we're only going to spend until 9:30 in this whole group session. The bulk of our time is going to be in grade band breakouts. So you'll be with your grade band until 11:45, where you're doing some really specific work on the content and number corner activities for your grade band. And we'll come back to this link, this whole group link, at 11:45, just to do some closing and some next steps. As Trish and Jess were saying, our work together this year, we have 4 follow-up sessions following this kind of initial launch. What's going to happen is following each of these sessions, each grade will have one focal recording workout that you're going to do in your class. So we will look through your upcoming workouts. That's how we're choosing the content we're working on. You'll have some time to plan at each of our sessions. And we're asking you to go off, and when you enact that workout in your class, we're asking you to keep a copy of your recording. So if you're recording on your board, we'll ask you to take a picture. If you are recording on chart paper, you could keep your chart paper, right? We just want you to bring some kind of record of your recording back to our next session, because the way that we can learn more about recording is to see inside of each other's classrooms. And this is going to be our way to do that. So you're going to bring that record with you to the next session. We'll send out reminders, so don't stress. You'll get a reminder, you'll record your stuff, you'll bring it back with you, and we're going to do what's called an artifact club. We're going to share our recordings together. We're going to give each other some feedback. We're going to see what we can learn from each other's recordings. That should also be low stress. This is not like you need to bring your best work. We're doing the messy work of teaching, right? So bring what you got. We'll help each other, we'll learn from each other, we'll do some sharing, right? So that's going to happen at each one of our sessions together. Is anybody right now panicking a little about having to bring a picture of their recording? We're all good? I'm not stressing anybody out? Great. Okay, so we're going to be doing that across the year. And then in each session, we're going to have a little bit of new learning where we're focusing on some of the work that goes along with or supports recording. So you can see here our plan for right now. And I'm going to say for right now, because as we learn from you, our plan might change a little bit on what it is that we're going to focus on and work on, depending on what people bring back for the recordings or where your stress points are. But right now, our plan is that on October, we'll work a little bit on eliciting student thinking, listening to students' ideas, and how we map those onto representations. In November, we're going to work a little bit on annotating to support student understanding. In February, we'll continue work on annotation and organizing our boards so that we can connect ideas. And then in March, we're really going to focus in on how we can use records to help kids talk to one another and use one another's thinking. So that's our plan for right now. We'll do an artifact club, we'll do a little bit of new learning, and you'll always have time to use that new learning in planning for an upcoming number corner activity. Okay. Any questions about our plan for the year? I know that was really fast. We're good. Okay. So I want to bring us back to just doing a little bit of kind of orienting again to the year. I know some of you were able to do the pre-work, some of you were not. And so I just want to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page about what our work is together. So, as Trish and Jess were framing for us, and you saw in the video if you were able to watch it, our goal is to have classrooms where kids are talking and thinking about mathematics, right? And that their thinking is at the center of the work that we're doing. They are building positive mathematical identities, and we're really doing collective work together. And by collective work, we mean that we need each other to learn the math, right? We're using each other's ideas, we're building understanding together. And so that's our goal over all of this. And recording is one kind of support to make this classroom a reality, right? You dug in a little bit to this work of recording. You tried out some different activities, hopefully if you had time to do it. You maybe skimmed really fast an article about recording. But what we're going to be thinking about kind of across this year is a set of questions that we can ask ourselves as we're working on recording, as we're planning for our recording, and then as we're doing that with our kids in our classrooms. One question that we're really going to think about is like, what do we actually need to write on the board and why do we need to write it? So somebody raised this in the chat earlier, but kids have lots of things that they're sharing when we're asking questions about mathematics. And we need to decide, like, is it worth putting up on the board? Is it a big idea that we're going to focus on? Is it kind of an aside? And like, why do we want these different things on the board? So we'll do some work on that, and that'll be kind of a continual question for us as we do this work. The second thing that we're going to think about and always practice asking ourselves is, how can we write a student's idea down so that it's both actually what they said, right, and mathematically accurate? Because sometimes that's really hard, right? I'm not saying that anybody in this Zoom meeting has done this, but sometimes what we do is we write down what we wish students had said, rather than what they actually said out loud, because we really want to get an idea on the board. And we're going to practice kind of like rolling back and thinking about both, like, I can get a student's idea out the way they said it, and I can contribute what I want to have out in front of the class in a way that's different, right? So we're going to work on that a little bit together. We're also going to be asking ourselves questions about how we organize our boards. Does anybody on here sometimes, like at the end of class, you feel like, oh, my board's a mess, like things are written kind of all over, it's hard to figure out, like, wait, where did that thing come from? Recording is hard, right? And I'm guessing for most of us that nobody ever taught us how to do it. You just kind of like got a classroom and people were like, write stuff down, and assumed that that was easy to do, right? And so sometimes we come out and our board is a little bit of like a hot mess express, and you can see that like maybe kids don't know how these ideas go together or what we even decided or what's important. We're going to be thinking about like, how do we like organize our board into spaces so that like we can separate ideas? How do we put things next to each other so that kids can actually like physically see how they're related? And so some of you were able to try that out using that activity that was in our pre-work, where you had 4 pieces of student work and thought about like, what might you want them to see? What would you want to have next to each other? And so we're going to continue to think about that and do some of that work together also. Okay. And then like the most important, I know it's at the bottom of the list, but this really is the most important, like, how can we write on the board and have representations and have little notes that actually help all of the kids in our class understand somebody else's idea, right? Because if we want to do collective work, we have to be able to make sense of what other people are saying. And recording can help us do that, right? Because sometimes we are in discussions where lots of ideas are being thrown around and nothing's being written down, and we just kind of lose track of like, what was somebody actually saying? Like, what were they thinking about? What was their process? Recording can help keep that at the front for students in our classrooms. And so we're going to be thinking about both, how do we get it up there, and like, what do we need to have written down so that they can understand somebody else's thinking. right? So, but in order to do that, I just want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing together, right? It's math, right? And so the math matters, and it matters for what you decide to write down, what's important to write down, and what you want students to take away. So together, we're going to be working on building our own collective knowledge of what's important math content at each of our grade levels. So each of our sessions, we're going to spend time actually working on math content and thinking about what we want students to be able to take away. And sometimes it feels like at the surface that the math is, I'm going to air quote, like so easy. Why would we need to talk about it? But that's often the space where we need to spend a lot of time, because things that are really easy for us as adults, that usually means that there's a lot of knowledge that we're just kind of squishing, right? If you think about all the work for kids that goes into things like counting, there's a lot of knowledge there. But as adults, we're like, you just count. So we're going to spend some time really digging into that content and unpacking it and making sure that we understand what's at stake for kids, what they need to know, and a little bit about like, how does that match with representations that we can use, right? We're going to look at those different representations and think about how they support different kinds of components. So today you're going to dig into one or two representations in your grade band. And then we're always going to be thinking about the match between the mathematical idea and the representation. So one thing about math teaching, right, is that whenever we get new curriculum materials, you get lots of stuff along with it. You get a manipulative kit, you get these blackline masters, like whatever, and you just sort of use what you like, right? And we don't get a lot of support or time to think about like, what's the purpose of some of these things? Like, why is somebody telling me, for example, to use a number line? Maybe I don't like number lines, so I decide to use some other representation, right? But lots of times there's a real mathematical reason to use a particular representation. And sometimes inside of curriculum materials, whoever wrote it has chosen a representation that isn't great, and we need to make a decision as teachers to use something else, right? But to be able to do that, we need to do some thinking together about that match. And so that's what we're going to be working on in these sessions together. Okay. So we are going to go ahead and move to our grade level breakouts. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for a second so that I can pop into the chat where each of this is going to go. But in your grade level breakouts, that's the set of work that you're going to do. You're going to dig into some math. You're going to think about those representations. You're going to think about the match between those representations and the mathematical ideas that you're trying to build. And you're going to do some planning for your number corner activities. Okay. And so we're going to roll off of this call in grade level groups, okay? We're going to have 3 grade level groups that we're working with today. Kindergarten and first grade, you are going to be together, okay? And if you are a leader who has kindergarten and first grade teachers here and you want to be with your kindergarten and first grade teachers, you are welcome to join that group, okay? If you don't have a group of teachers here, you're going to join a different group, okay? So if you are in kindergarten or first grade, you are going to join Nicole, and the link to your Zoom is in the chat. Okay, so K1, go ahead and roll off, and we will see you back on this Zoom link at 11:45. Okay, second grade, you are going to stay here with me. Okay, so you don't have to do anything right now. Okay, if you are in grade 3, 4, or 5, or you are a leader who's here without a group of teachers, you are going to join Heather at this Zoom link. Okay. So you can go ahead and join Heather, and we'll see you back here at 11:45. Okay. And hopefully everybody who we have left is second grade, yeah? We're all where we're, oh no, okay. Let's
So
see.
is the last link in the chat for the grades 3 through 5?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. All right, now is everybody here second grade? Excellent. Okay. How is everyone? Okay. Good. Who is panicking about the start of school? Anyone? Anyone? We're all okay. Thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you being here right at the beginning of the school year. Yet know that we are going to do some planning that is going to set you up for things that you have to do at the beginning of the school year. So appreciate you and your time. Okay. I am going to go ahead and start sharing again. So hold on one sec. Okay. We are going to be focusing on using number lines to support computational fluency, and our focus, our math focus, is going to be on addition, because addition is a really core operation in second grade, right? Hold on one second and let me get people back in here. I think people got booted off. Okay. So that'll be our focus. It's a great beginning of the year focus. We're doing lots of work on addition at the beginning of the year. So I want to just get us started by doing a little bit of a stop and jot. You have two choices. One is you can just like write on your notebook. You're thinking about these questions. Actually, three choices. Another is you could just think to yourself for a minute if you don't feel like writing anything down. That's fine with me. Okay. The other is you can pop something into the chat, but I am going to ask people to share out in just a minute. So just to kind of get ourselves into our headspace around the work that we do in addition, take a moment and jot down to yourselves or think to yourselves, like, what are typical strategies that you see from your second graders, maybe at the beginning of the year? Let's stay focused on the beginning of the year, when they solve addition problems. So just some typical strategies that your kids use to solve addition problems. And then I want you to take a sec and think about, like, what do you use to represent their thinking that you feel like reflects their strategies, right? So are there manipulatives you use? Are there kind of like visual recordings that you use? Like, how do you help them see, the whole class see what their thinking is? So just take like 2 minutes and jot some notes to yourself, and then we'll do a little bit of sharing. Okay, take 30 more seconds. Okay, so I am going to pop you into breakout rooms to share a little bit so you have an opportunity to meet some other people. So say hello, share your reflections on these questions. Okay, here you go. We'll see you in 3 minutes.
Hi,
Hi.
I think I got in the wrong room. Can you repost the 345 link?
Are you in second? Or which one do you need?
I'm in fourth grade,
You're in fourth grade. Okay, give me 1 second.
and I think I got in with the littles.
Oh, yep, that's not right. Hold on 1 second. Where did my note go? Okay, you are going Where did my chat go? Okay, try that link.
Thank you.
You're welcome. People are rolling back. Okay. I think we have everyone back. So some of the things that might have come up for you as you were talking about addition strategies that are typical for your second graders, right? One might be counting all, right? And just so that we all have the same like kind of terminology for strategies that kids are using, counting all, right? If they were doing the problem 2 + 3, they would be literally counting all of them, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get their sum. Okay? We might see kids counting on from the first number. So for 2 + 3, they would be doing starting at 2 and then going 3, 4, 5. Okay. We might see them counting on from the largest number. So picking the biggest and then counting on from there. So starting at 3 and then doing 4, 5. Right? And we might see some tens focused strategies. So if we're looking at double digit addition, So something like 12 plus 34, we might see them counting on by tens, right? So starting with 12 or even starting with 34, depending on where they're at. So counting by tens and doing 12, 22, 32, 42, right? Getting their 30 and then counting up from there, 43, 44, 45, 46, right? Or starting with a 34 and doing the same thing. We might see them counting the number of tens and the number of ones. So for 12 plus 34, noting that there's 1 10 and 3 tens, so that's 40. And then 2 and 4 is 6, so that's 46. That should say 4, sorry. We might also see them like jumping by multiples of tens, right? So starting with 12 and then jumping by 30, getting to 42, and then adding on from there, right? Are there other strategies that came up for you as you were talking in your small groups that didn't make it to this list? These were the things? Okay, okay. So I want to get recorded a little bit of like what are some representations that you feel like best highlight the thinking that is associated with these strategies? So like what would you use if a kid is counting all? Like what would you show in the board? What would you write? What would you actually use? Would you draw a hand to show that they're counting? Would you use a number line? Would you use your 10 frames? Like how are you representing what kids are thinking about when they're doing each of these things? Okay. So what we're going to do to kind of record people's thinking is we're going to go back into our breakout room. So you'll stay with this group for a little bit. You're going to go back to your breakout rooms and you're going to join a Jamboard. And each breakout room has a number, and you are just going to find the Jamboard page that matches the number of your breakout group, and that's where you're going to record your thinking. You're going to see on this Jamboard that there's a sticky note for each of those strategies. Okay. You can add sticky notes, you can add text, you should be able to edit, but you're just going to make some notes, talk with your group, make some notes about for each of these strategies. What do you think is the best representation and why? Okay, so go ahead and click on the Jamboard link in the chat just to make sure everybody can get there.
The link gave me a specific, like it's a scary link, like it didn't want me to open it, but it did go to the right place. So if anybody
Okay.
else gets a notification, it is the right link.
Okay. I don't
But
know why I
it's
did that. I
suspicious.
promise it's not scary. It's in our folder, so it's a safe place to be. But go ahead and jump to that Jamboard, and I'm going to push you back out to your breakout rooms, and we're just going to take another 3 to 4 minutes to add some of those notes. I'll be following you along in your Jamboards, and I'll pull people back together when I see lots of notes in there. So please be making use of that. That's how I'm going to monitor where you're at. Okay, so I'll open the rooms back up, and we'll see you in a few minutes.
Hi, ladies. Sorry to interrupt. I
Yeah.
can't mine says I need to request access and I can't do anything on the Jamboard. Did I miss something that I was?
No, it should be open, but hold on a second. Let
We're under
me-
view only. That's what I popped in to check
That's
too.
what we're under too.
Okay. Let me resend the link. I don't know why it does this. Hold on. Let me put it in chat. And then I will also try that and see if that works, or just refresh.
Yep, that works.
Yep.
I can move stuff around now.
Okay. Okay.
So
Just let
can I
people
read-
know to refresh their screen and they should be fine. You need to be bumped back in.
Yep,
it
I
looks
was
like
in
it. There's nowhere
number
to,
2,
and
if
I
you
was
can get
in,
me to 2.
I was
Okay.
in 4, if that helped out.
Okay. When you click on breakout rooms at the bottom, can you see a request?
I don't have a breakout room section. That's why
Oh wait,
oh no, join
Yep, you
breakout room.
can.
Sorry.
It's
Yeah,
under
I found
more.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yep. Mallory, you muted.
I forgot to click the link before I went to the Jamboard, but my partner in the breakout room is having trouble even using it. So we came back this way to see if you could maybe help
You want me
us.
to pop in? Yep, love to pop in. Oh, she's here, right? Okay. So
Yes.
try, hold on one second. Click. Oh. If you all are talking, that's fine. I'm not going to stress about it. Like,
Okay.
so like, don't worry about like the technology or whatever today. But if you want to try, like, click on that link again. There were something
Okay.
wrong with it in the beginning. I don't know. It wasn't letting people edit, or it was letting some people edit. But if you
Okay.
click on it again, you should be able to edit. And you don't, like, some people are like drawing representations. You don't have to. If you want, you can just like add a sticky note and drag it next to one and say like, I would draw a hand. You don't have to like
Okay.
try to draw a hand. Some people are getting fancy, but don't stress about it.
All right,
Alright.
and yes, now I can see all the little edit options on the left. I didn't
It
have.
wasn't giving it to you before.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, okay, well,
Okay.
that's good.
And I think you can hop back out if you go to the more at the bottom. I think you can rejoin your breakout room.
Oh, yep. I see a button that says that. Yep. Okay.
Okay. So
All
we'll
right.
send you back and we'll just take a couple more minutes, and don't stress about not having it all filled out when we come back.
Okay, and where am I going to get back to the breakout room, did you
The
say?
3 dots at the bottom that say more.
Gotcha.
Do you see a breakout, like join a breakout
Join
room?
breakout room, yep.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Okay, people are rolling in. Okay, it looks like we have everybody back. Maybe we have one more room. Yep, we have one more coming. 1 second. Okay. Welcome back, everybody. Wherever you were at is fine. I want to say one thing that I should have said up front, and that is like, do not let the technology stress you out, right? If something isn't working for you in a Jamboard, like, don't worry about it. It's there to help us have conversations. And like, if you can write things down, write things down. If you just want to talk in your group, you can talk in your group. I'm going to trust you all to like do what you need to do to have these conversations, because the conversations are what matters. But some of you got fancy in your Jamboard. Like some of you were all like Googling images and pulling them in. Some of you were like writing notes about what you would do, and some of you were like drawing, getting like crazy fancy. But just take a second and scroll through other people's Jamboards just to take a look at some of the choices that they were making about what representations they might use and how they might record some of those ideas. So just take 1 minute to scroll through, and then I have something I want us to just chat about. Did everybody get a chance to peek through those? Okay. So what I wanted to kind of open up to talk about is, like, what were you considering when you were choosing a representation? Like, what were some of the things that were coming up for you that helped you say, oh, you know what I would do is I would use counters, or I would use a hand, or I would use a number line. Like, what were you thinking about that particular strategy and the representation that you chose? And I'm just going to say, like, just come off mute and share some of what you were thinking about.
We
talked
kept
a lot
saying,
Go ahead.
go ahead. Sorry. We just kept saying that these were the strategies we would use, and we weren't sure if this is what the kids would suggest.
So if the kids were using a particular model at all. Yeah. Yeah. So that might be a consideration, right? Is like if a kid says, like, so I counted on my fingers, then we might choose to record a hand. If they were like thinking about counters, we might choose to record counters. So that's one thing to be thinking about. Okay. What else were you thinking about as you were trying to match representations?
I was going to say that we really talked about what we saw kids doing.
So say a little bit more about that.
What words were they saying? What actions were they doing? What were they getting out? Or what physical actions did they have going on at the time?
So did we see them doing this? Did we see them like grabbing their counters and moving their counters? Were there other things that people were thinking about? So I hear like the words that kids are using and the kind of physical movements we see them making, helping us think about what we would use to record. Are there other things other considerations that people had? Okay. So the other thing that I think about is what's going to help other kids in the class understand their strategy too, right? So sometimes like kids might have used their fingers, but we've been using number lines a lot, and I might want to do some mapping between like how they use their fingers and what that looks like on the number line. So I might either choose to use the number line or ask a question about, you use your fingers, what would that look like on the number line? And then we build that thing together. Or I might choose to write both of those things down and like make some connections between them. Okay. We're going to jump into thinking about a particular representation. And we are going to, let me make sure that we are going to be thinking about number lines. And the reason that we're going to focus on number lines is because they're a key representation in number corners. And, you know, a lot of times in your number corner activities, it says to use a number line, or it says to use a different representation, or you're using lots of different representations. But number lines are something that I feel like people don't get a lot of support in thinking about, right? They're just kind of there and you're supposed to use them. So we're going to dig in a little bit and think about like why number lines and what are the kinds of things that we need to think about. So I want to raise for us just a couple of like key features of the number line and why it matters that we're putting them on our representations. Right, so one kind of key feature is that it's got arrows at both ends. And I'm just going to say that arrows at both ends are really important. What happens for kids a lot of times is that they see number line segments, and it doesn't help them think about the fact that, like, even though we sort of typically see the middle of the number line, right, from like 0 to 10 or 0 to 20 or 0 to 100, that really the number line goes in both directions. We've got positive numbers, we've got negative numbers, and they go on forever in both of those directions. So making sure that you're putting arrows on your number line just to reinforce that, like, we're only seeing this part of it, but it keeps going, right? That's one piece to keep in mind. When you're pulling number lines, when you're drawing them on the board, just try to get in the habit of making sure that you're putting those arrows on there. I'm about to break my own rule for a second, and I'll tell you why. Or in a second, I'll tell you why, but try to make sure that you're putting those arrows on there, okay? The other thing to pay attention to or to note about the number line that we don't really talk about is that the point on the number line is representing the distance and direction from 0, okay? So when I think about like the number 5, what that's saying is that when I start at 0, I'm moving 5 to the right. That 5 represents how far away it is, right? And so that's a different kind of representation than like if I use 5 counters, right? 5 counters is representing 5 discrete objects that I put down, and I can physically count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and put my finger there. But when I think about a number line, like the 5-ness of 5 is the distance that like my finger moves to get from 0 to 5, right? So when we're using number lines, we're thinking about magnitude, how far, and direction, positive or negative, right? And so when you're using those number lines, think about, as much as you can, showing kids the movement or the interval. So 2 kinds of hand motions to think about when you're using those number lines. I'm going to 5, I'm going to show that I'm at 5, or this is 5, using those interval fingers. Okay, so arrows on both lines, movement, distance, right? The other thing to keep in mind, like, you don't have to be like super tied down to this, but number lines are built on equivalent spaces, right? So even when we're doing something like using an open number line, like making sure, you know, an open number lines don't have any numbers marked on them, we're just kind of making jumps, making sure that they're kind of like relatively representative of the magnitude, right? So that like a 10 jump and a 1 jump aren't exactly the same. You don't have to be super accurate with it if you're using that open number line, but like enough that kids are getting the idea that like the distance is what matters, that interval is what matters, right? So we do have those equivalent spaces in the number line, but some things to think about are, you know, as you're using your curriculum materials, as you're working in your number corner activities, thinking about like what's the diet of number lines that kids are getting. So what are they seeing and what are they not seeing with regards to number lines, and just making sure you've got some complementary things in there. So one of the ways that we work on number lines, and we're not going to get to this today, we might pick it up later, is that we have like missing parts of the number line. We might not mark all of the tick marks. We might not mark all of the numbers. And eliciting from kids if they can name where something missing would be placed on the number line. So seeing number lines that aren't all fully marked out for them, but have some of the markings on there so that they can begin to build that idea that even when we're looking at this number line, we don't see all of the things that are represented on the number line, right? There are halves in between each of these numbers. There are quarters in between each of these numbers. There are infinitely many numbers on this number line as it is in front of us, not even without the things that we don't see. And there are things that we can do when we're teaching to reinforce those. Okay. So I'm going to pause there for just a second before we move on to our next, like, thinking about the number line, and just see like what questions are coming up for you as you think about these features of the number line. Do you have questions? Do you have reflections, suggestions, things to think about? We're all feeling good? Okay, you just got to unmute and yell at me.
I
Okay.
was gonna ask a question.
Yeah.
So you use two kind of hand motions.
Mm-hmm.
Will you repeat those?
Yep. So one is like gesturing along the number line. So if I'm going to a number, like I'm saying, like, where's 7 on the number line, that I start at 0 and move my finger along the number line until I get to 7. So that helps that, like, we're really talking about this movement. And what that's going to do for kids later on is when you start using the number line, honestly, to get into things like multiplication, they need to understand that the way that multiplication is represented is a movement and like multiple movements and directions. So if we can reinforce that early, they're able to better make that connection. Because otherwise, work on the number line for like multiplication and for integers is like, what are we doing here, right? If all they've done is point to a number on the number line. So that's one kind of motion to reinforce. The other is like thinking about if we're looking at, say, like 4 on the number line, like putting our fingers on the interval from 0 to 1, right? So we're thinking about 4, we just do this where our fingers touch 0 and 4 so that we know we're talking about the space. And sometimes when I do that, I try to do this, right? So I do my like unpinching motion to help us think about like that we're thinking about this space here as being 4. Right. Okay. So the other thing about number lines is thinking about how we mark on them what's happening, right? And that's another place where either we've just kind of like built some habits because nobody has talked to us before about like how do you mark things on the number line, or we've just seen examples and we just kind of do it. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time to think about the problem 3 plus 2. Really straightforward, right? There are 4 number line representations here on the screen of 3 plus 2, right? There are no arrows because I had to screenshot it and I was too lazy to put arrows on my screenshot. So sorry, but I'm just going to tell you I broke my own rule because time. But what I'd like you to think a little bit about is look at these 4 different representations and think about what would a student have said that would prompt you to record using these different kinds of number lines, right? Because there are different things that a student might say that would prompt me to use this first one where I just have a point at 3 and a point at 5 and an arrow that says +2, right? So jot some notes to yourself, like what might a student say? And I'm going to let you chat a little bit in your breakout rooms because I think that's a little bit easier for you than talking in whole group. When you guys go to breakout rooms, do you see my slides? No? Okay. They are in our folder if you want to pull them up from our folder so that you can still see these representations. So if you go to our folder, you'll see grade 2, and there is a grade 2 virtual session 8/15/24 PDF there. Okay, and you can scroll through it to see this image. Just don't cheat and go forward, okay? All right. Do you want me to pop a direct link to that file in here so you can find it? Okay, give me one sec. All right, so in the chat, okay, is a link to that direct file. So if you want to click on that, you can scroll through to get to this representing addition on the number line. And then I'm going to pop you out to just talk a little bit in your breakout rooms. Try to talk through what would a kid say that would make you write each of these representations, okay? And we'll see you in just a couple minutes, just a few minutes to chat, okay? Okay, Leah. think people are rolling in 1 second. Okay. So as you were thinking about each of these different number line representations, okay, what are some of the things that came up for you? Like why would you choose, for example, to do this first representation where I have a point at 3, one at 5, and a +2? What are the kinds of things that you were talking about kids might say that would have you do that first representation?
Kids would say, I start at 3.
So if they say I start at 3, you would want to start at 3. And then when would you do the just +2 jump? Like what might be the kind of things that they say that would make you just do the +2?
Well, I said, my daughter, she'll be in 3rd grade, but some of these facts she just has memorized. So that would be an explanation. I just know that 3 + 2 = 5.
So if they say like, 3 + 2 is 5, and we want to represent it here for other kids, the +2, right, is like the implied part. Like I know my facts and I know that I land at 5, but the +2 there, right, like shows everybody else, so they can kind of come along with that. It also helps them think about where different parts of an addition problem show up on the number line, right? If you look here, right, the 3 is our starting number, and that gets marked on the number line, but the other number that gets marked is the sum, like where you land, right? So the other add-in gets thrown up across the top, and sometimes that can be confusing, right? Because it's not what we do in subtraction, depending on the way we're thinking about subtraction. So kind of trying to be clear about what each of those things is helpful. How about this, the one to the right of that has a point at 0, one at 3, and one at 5, and has the hops of 3 and 2. What might a kid say that would have you do that one? Why might you use that one?
If they said something like, if I have 3 and I add 2, I have 5, or I'll have 5.
Okay, so both the first one and the second one, we really could use with either kind of reasoning. So if they say, like, I started at 2, I know, or 3, I know that 3 + 2 is 5, I could use either of these representations. Is there something about the second one that starts at 0 that you think might highlight something different for kids about the math?
I think if they gave you a visual representation, like if they said, if you have 3 and you add 2, with their fingers or something, you'd want to show that 0 to 3.
So one might be if they were showing like the objects, or they were using counters, but we wanted to map it onto a number line so we could see the 3 and the 2. Are there other things that you're thinking about with this one? Other reasons you might kind of show both of those pieces?
Well, I think it highlights for kids that a number is the distance that you were talking about.
So it's reinforcing that distance, right? That 3 is that distance from 0 to 3, and then 2, it's that distance, another additional distance. We're moving more from 3 to 5, right? So it's highlighting some of those different mathematical ideas. And that's not to say that you have to make one choice or the other. We just want to be aware that, like, if we're feeling like kids aren't really getting the concept of what the number line is representing, and they're just kind of like following the steps of, I mark the number where I start, and then I mark my jump, and where I land is the number, like they're memorizing a procedure, we might want to use a representation that's more like that second one, that's reinforcing, like, look, I'm taking these 2 distances and I'm adding those 2 distances together. Like that's what's getting added. Like that's what that second representation does. So, depending on where you're feeling like your kids are at conceptually, that second one is helping with that distance. And it can also be a support for kids that are like confused about why some things are marked up top, some things show up on the number line. That second one has your add-ins both show up on the top, right? Your 3 and your 2 are both there, and we're like marking our progress along the way, and where we end up is our sum, right? Whereas in the first one, the 3, we're starting from the 3, and then we've got the 2. So there are different ways of thinking about how the addends show up and what the points on the number line mean. Okay. So just thinking a little bit about how you might want to use those two ideas.
I also think too that kids sometimes have a difficult time showing an understanding of what 7 looks like versus 9 or 3 versus 2. So this visually shows them it's larger. It's the larger number, and you know, it just is a reality that some kids struggle with that. So this is
it's reinforcing order, right? Order and magnitude.
Yeah.
And if we can continue to show the negative part of the number line, it's also helping them kind of repeatedly see that, like, the reason the numbers go in the opposite direction when you're looking at negatives is because you're counting that distance from 0. So the more that they can just kind of like see it, even if we're not talking about that right now, right? Like the number line that you have up in your room, having some negative numbers on it, whether you're talking about them or not, just kind of gives them that repeated exposure to, like, the numbers are moving away from 0. Because later when they do introduce negative numbers, and it's not for a while, like, kids aren't sure what to do with them on the number line, right? They think like, oh, I've got positive 10, so then right next to 0, I'm going to put negative 10, negative 9, negative 8, right? Because it's counting the same way. But if we can give them some exposure, it's going to help with that magnitude issue too. How about those ones on the bottom? What were you thinking about there for what kids might say and why you might record those things? So let's look at that bottom left one that starts at 0, has jumps of 1 to get to 3, has jumps of 1 to get to 5. Thoughts about what kids might say or why you might use that one?
We talked about those are the kids that are using their fingers. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I like the separate hands too, right? Like, so we might want to think about if we're trying to like transition kids to a number line or see what that looks like on a number line, putting those hands down below, right? So, you know, some of this is like really hard to do in the moment, right? Like drawing those different kind of hands. You could keep little hand magnets, depending on what kind of surface you're using, that have the different, you know, just printouts of those different things that you put up underneath your number line to show 3 and 2, that you just pop up alongside your, you know, your number line representation. So you don't also have to like try to sketch a hand with 3 fingers up. Some of us are faster at drawing and or better at drawing than others. So if that's not in your wheelhouse, you know, print them out, put some magnets on them and stick them up there, or, you know, like sticky tape or whatever you need to be able to do that. But that's the match that I might put there, is the 3 and the 2 with the separate hands. Okay. What about that one on the bottom right? Why might we have the 3 jump, but then individual +1s to get to 5?
Again, that could be there's 3, 4, 5.
So either like 3, like I knew I had 3 and then I counted up 2, or the kids who go 3, 4, 5, right? But something about like knowing that they're starting at 3, but again, like I'm showing the I have is the distance, right, from 0 to 3, and not just the starting at 3. Okay. So I'm going to do a quick stop and chat with us, and then we're going to take a break because we've been online for a while. And standing and using the restroom and drinking water might be good for us, and or lots of caffeine. But before we do that, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to transition to looking at a number corner activity that makes use of number lines, and we're going to do some thinking about what kind of number line representation we might want. So I wanted to have everybody just stop and jot for a moment. Like, what are you thinking about right now? Like, why might you choose to start at 0 on the number line when you're representing something? Why might you choose to start at one of the addends, right? And like, what are the math ideas that each of those would reinforce? So just jot a note to yourself. And once you have that note done, you can turn your camera off, you can mute, you can go for a break. And I will see you back online in 10 minutes. Does that work for everybody? Is 10 minutes long enough? You can stretch a little, get some coffee, go to the bathroom. So at 10:40, we'll come back together. Okay, we'll come back in just a minute. Okay. All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope you all got up to stretch. I see Trisha's got her coffee, so she's ready to rock for the rest of the morning. I'm trying to behave myself and drink water. That is great. Okay, so the next phase of work that we're going to do together is we're going to dig into collaboratively planning day 14 computational fluency from your upcoming workouts. And part of the reason that we're focusing on this one is because the math is actually pretty complicated, right? Thinking about the commutative property and how you make it make sense to kids other than just telling them what it is and that it's true. And so we're going to be thinking about that math together, and it uses number line representations. And the care you take with the number line representations is really going to help you help your kids understand what the commutative property is and why it works. So we're going to focus in on that one, and this is going to be the one that everybody's going to go off and do, and that you're going to save your recording from, okay? And so we'll send reminders, letting you know, don't forget to record day 14. But this is the one that we want to bring back because the math and the representations are challenging, okay? So let's get started. So the problem series, how many of you had a chance to look over the day 14 plan that was in the folder? Anybody? Okay, I'll give you the kind of overview of what it is, and we're going to dig into parts of it as we go along. So on day 14, there's a little bit of stuff after this, but these are the first kind of 5 activities, and we're going to focus on these ones because these are the ones that are kind of highly related together and are like lead to a series of understandings. So the kind of big picture of what's happening is it starts with a problem that students are like acting out as a class, and then you're recording the different strategies that they're using. And that's the problem is there were 5 frogs swimming in the lake, then 3 more frogs joined them. How many frogs were there in all? Okay. Then the next activity is that you are supposed to display on a number line pair the problem 5 plus 3. Okay. And the directions ask you to begin at 5, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, right? So 2 different kinds of representations of the 5 plus 3, right? The next activity, kids are asked to show on their fingers. There were 3 ducks in the pond and 5 more ducks joined them. How many ducks were there in all? We collect student solutions and strategies and record those. And then the next activity is to solve that duck problem on the second number line in the pair. So you're seeing them next to each other. So the kind of 2 problem sets are 5 plus 3 and 3 plus 5, right? So they're working on them and they're getting represented in the double number line. And then your job is to explain the commutative property, okay? So we're going to be thinking a little bit together, like how would you explain the commutative property? Okay. So I'm just going to ask you to take like 1 minute and think in your head, like what would you say to explain the commutative property? And you don't have to say it out loud. I just want you to be thinking about it before we get into it. Okay. We're going to be doing some thinking about what are the representations that are kind of already embedded in each of these tasks? And do we need to make adjustments to them that are going to help kids really understand what the commutative property is and why it works? And we're going to do some thinking about, are there other representations that we're going to need to add, right? Because the materials that you have can't do all the things for you, right? They put in there some suggestions that they have about what you should be recording and why you're using those things. But we know that there are things that we're going to have to add in. There are solutions that kids come up with that are not in the notes of what students might say. And a lot of those conversations are like, man, I wish my kids would say this when I ask this question, right? They're not quite like what we might actually hear. And so we're going to be doing some thinking and planning and representing related to that. Okay. All right. So just as a reminder, because we don't all do math all the time, the commutative property of addition just says that changing the order of the add-ins doesn't change the sum, right? So it doesn't matter what order you add in. You can start with whatever number you want, right? So just take 1 second to kind of jot down to yourself, what representations might you use to help kids get why that's true for any addition problem that you give them? Why it doesn't matter what order you add in. Just jot down some ideas to yourself and then we'll do a little bit of sharing. If you have some ideas, just give me a thumbs up. If you're still thinking, that's cool too. It's just hard for me to tell on Zoom. Give people another minute. Okay, so let's hear a little bit about what people were thinking. Like, what representation do you think would help kids get this idea that it doesn't matter what order you're adding in, you're going to get the same answer?
I think if you focusing on that distance, I think if you make sure your number line is starting at the 0 and you talk about like if you're adding two distances, the total distance is always going to be the same.
Mm-hmm. So a number line would be one kind of representation that would help them think about that. Were there other representations that people had in mind? Sarah?
I've had in the past like a student hold 3 sticks, a student hold 2 sticks, and we count the total and then we mix them up. And then no matter what order, we always get the same total. That's something
Mm-hmm.
just
So like using the physical representation of the objects, the number of objects, right? Why might that be a good representation for helping kids really understand that the order isn't going to matter? Like, how might that be different than the number line? Because I definitely think it is.
because it's not going in consecutive order from 0. It's mixed all around.
Right. And we can see that the objects, the stuff that we're counting, right,
It's the
isn't
same.
changing. I'm just like scooting where they are and they've got the same number of objects. So like having an object might make some things clearer than having a number line does. Right? Were there other representations that people were thinking about?
I use the magnetic dots of different colors and then rearrange them.
So that too, right? Like you can see the objects are staying the same. We're just like switching where they're at and which ones we're counting first. So that idea that when I'm doing addition, I'm counting how many, that really is what addition is. We use different strategies to do that, but it's counting all. And so like where they're at, which ones you count first doesn't matter.
You can use the same thing with cube trains.
Yep. So kind of lots of different versions of like how objects are helping kids understand, right? But then Michelle raised for us this question about the number line, right? And that's where we're going to go, because you can see in this activity, we've got potentially different kinds of representations when students are solving the problems, because we're going to want to pull the representations that go along with what they're sharing. But we also want to think carefully, like this task is asking us to represent on the number line, on two number lines that are next to each other. So we want to think a little bit about like, what are the features of those number lines that are going to help kids understand this commutative property? Okay. Oops. So next we're going to take a look at 4 different ways to show these number line pairs, right? So the problem that's in the book is different, or then the activity is different than what I have here. Here I have 7 plus 3, right? 7 plus 3 and 3 plus 7. So we're going to take a moment to look at these number line pairs and imagine that what we're trying to do is to help the kids in our class understand, using these number line pairs, what the commutative property is and why it's always true. Okay, so what we're going to think a little bit about is like, which one would you choose and why? Okay, and if you wanted to, are there features from different ones that you might like combine to make like the best representation ever? Okay, so I want to give you a chance to kind of like dig into this and talk a little bit. I know it's harder to talk on the spot in whole group. So we're going to bump back out to breakouts just for a minute so you can look at these in chat. Make sure you have the slides pulled up and you find this one. Somebody in your group finds this one so you can look at these representations together. Okay, but I'm going to push you out to your breakout rooms. Just give you a couple minutes, and when we come back, we're going to share like which ones you think is best and are there features you would combine. Okay. All right, here we go. We'll give people a second to roll in. Okay, I think we're all back. So as you thought about these number line pairs, right? What did you think was best going to support kids with understanding the commutative property? Which one did you all choose?
Well, we talked about the first pair of number lines, how there's a visual representation on how they end up at this, like they're the same distance. We thought maybe we would put the addition problem underneath like the other number lines were. We liked that, how they were written underneath. But that's the one, and it also shows the intervals, how the 7 is larger than the 3 and vice versa.
So in that first one, we can see both of the intervals. We can see that they end at the same number, right? And that one has the, like, it starts at 0. So we're seeing the kind of full distance that we've got there. Okay. Did other people choose the first one?
Well, that's why Rosa and I must be teaching partners. We said the exact same thing. We said we would combine the two. That was my exact observation. Our whole group liked the first one, and then I said the same thing about putting the equation underneath the number line as well. So that's why Rosa and I work so well together.
Okay. Any other choices that people made? We were all on the first one. Okay. Why not 2 or 3? Like, what does that feel like it might be missing? The second or third one there.
It
I feel
doesn't
like those show both add-ins. Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're okay, Heather.
Yeah, it doesn't have both add-ins kind of represented on the number line, right? So what happens when we use those kinds of representations are that it feels a little bit like magic, like, oh, look, we end up at the same number, rather than like really reinforcing that the reason that we're ending up at the same number is because we're combining those two distances that are the same in different ways, right? So it's not highlighting that part of it. And so for kids that aren't thinking about that starting place as being a distance from 0, they just see like, it's magical. Look, 3 and 7, like I ended up at the same number. Wow. And that's a different idea than really being able to help them see that it's the same thing with the permanent objects that we were talking about. Like you're counting the same thing, you're just counting them in different order. And on the number line, I'm counting the distance, that interval on there, right? The thing I want to highlight is that in your teacher materials, it actually says to start at 7 and to start at 3. Right? So you want to make sure that you're digging in and you're thinking about like where your kids are at and what you might want to add to these representations, because they're just guidelines for us, right? And so what we're actually going to do now is to dig into some planning together. And I'm clearly off time. What we're going to do together is going to feel like, Nicole, do you think we're going to plan like this all the time? And my answer is no, but we are going to plan like this when we're together, because it's a unique opportunity to kind of slow down and talk to other people and think really carefully about what representations you might use. And part of that is like building some habits about, what representations and what we might write down, so that we actually don't have to plan like this all the time. But we're going to use some of this time and this unique resource of having other people to like talk to and dig in with to do some of that work, right? Because it'll lighten the load on other number line activities that you're going to do. So we are going to dig in and we're going to think through this workout together. What we're going to do is we're going to do it in chunks. So I'm going to talk you through what we're going to do. I'm going to put you into groups, but I'm going to put you into groups with people that are working together. So we'll reformat our breakout rooms so that you can work with the people who are colleagues at your school or that you have a lead in with you. Okay. So we'll do that in just a second, but here's what's going to happen. The workout is kind of paired, right? So there are the first two activities. There's the act it out with the frogs and then displaying on the number line. We're going to work through a process where we're like looking at what strategies might kids share? What questions do you want to ask to get their thinking out so we can add more detail to those representations? And then what might you actually write on the board? And then we're going to think about the second representation and how you would connect it to what's already up on the board. Okay, and you're going to do a little bit of board sketching. So we'll do those two together, and then we're going to come back in whole group. Then you're going to do the second two together. So we're going to go through the same process with the ducks and the number line representation for the ducks. And then we're going to come back together and we're going to do a little bit of sharing. And then we're going to work on the explaining the commutative property. Okay, so that's the process we're going to go through. We're going to chunk, come back together, do some sharing. Chunk, come back together, do some sharing. You are going to have, not to stress you out, you are going to have a planning guide that has like a screenshot of what the directions are in the teacher guide for each of these components and has these questions on there. That's mostly for you to follow along with. You don't have to feel like you have to type into that document, right? This isn't like meant to be Nicole said I have to do this, so I have to do this. It's just there to kind of support you to like think and work together, okay? My for real preference would be that you have a piece of paper, just a regular old piece of paper in front of you that you are practicing writing down like what you would write on the board. So talk a little bit about like what student strategies would get shared and practice actually writing it down and trying to think about where would it go? What would you write? And use your paper to share with each other. That's why I said earlier, if you turn your blur off or you turn your background off, it works a little bit easier because otherwise funky things happen with Zoom. But that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to ask you to come back in whole group after planning the first section and like do a little bit of sharing. Okay. All right. So questions about what I'm going to send you off to do. All right. So you're going to get in a second. I'm going to put you in groups. You'll get a link to your group specific document so that if people do want to record into it, they can. That has this set of questions for the first section. It's actually got the questions for all of them, but just do the planning for these first two activities. Okay. What I'm going to do is reset up these breakout rooms, and I'm going to let you choose your breakout room. Okay. You can choose to be in there with your friends. So if you know that you're working with somebody, just somebody go first. You can see who's in there and just join them if you want to be planning together. Okay. So it's going to come up at the bottom. It's going to say there are 5 possible breakout rooms, and you can choose the room that you want to join. So like Leah, I'm going to ask you to join first, and then the people that are with you can join with you. And then who else is a lead that is working with teachers? That. Okay. So Samantha and Patty, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. join a new room. So like Leah, you join room 1, Samantha, you join room 2, Patty, you join room 3, and then everybody else join to be with who you need to be with. Okay. And Molly and Craig, if you guys want your own room because you're already together, you can just be in your own breakout room. You can just choose one, and that's fine that there's only one physical person on Zoom in there. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get those started, but don't leave yet because I'm a little bit worried about the links to those documents working. So all of the rooms are open. Okay. Room 1 is going to be Leah and colleagues. And I'm going to put a link. I'm going to put a link to the planning document that goes with room 1 in the chat. So Leah, grab that link. Okay. And then you can head out and the people that are going with you can head out. Okay. Group 2.
I don't see a link to the breakout room.
It's not, go to your more. your three dots in the bottom?
It's not there.
It's not there? Oh, you know what? It helps if Nicole clicks on open.
Now it's there. Thank you.
That would be step one, right?
Sarah and Sandy, if you want to join me, since Nick's not here, you could join me in room 1. Okay.
Okay. In room 2, Samantha, there's your link. Okay. Right. And you can join your room when you're ready. Okay. In room 3, there's the link for room 3. And wait, you all moved on my screen and now I can't remember. Who's room 3?
I am Patty.
Patty. Okay, Patty and friends, room 3. Thank you, Trish, for writing that in the chat. That's your document. Okay. And then room 4. Okay. Are there people who would like to be together in room 4?
Mallory and I work together occasionally.
Great. Okay. Why don't you all take room 4? And there's your document. Okay. And then room 5. Okay. Let's put everybody but Molly and Craig in room 5. And then Molly and Craig, I'll just give you room 6 and the document for room 6. And then you can just talk to each other. Is that okay? Okay. So this last document there that just showed up in the link, that is, thank you, Trish. That is room 6. Okay. Okay. So I think Heather and Andrea, you're going to room 5, right?
I'm gonna join Craig if they get there.
Okay.
In their room. They're new to number corner, so I'm gonna give them a little bit.
Oh, great. Great.
We're
doing our amateur hour in all areas here this morning.
Oh, maybe I didn't add it. No,
Yes,
you know what I need to do?
I
is,
will be
like,
there.
What
do
is
I
there?
add a room, Trish? Is that what I did?
Only because the last time it's come up automatically, so we've been able to just click.
Oh, gotcha.
Join. Are we should
Can
we click this
I don't know if you can add a room. No.
Is it not going to let me do it? Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move. Heather's going to be like, what? I'm going to move Heather into room 4 with Mallory.
Let's move Heather to room 4.
Yeah.
5. We can make you go there.
I don't know why.
Can we just
Then you'll
mute
get
and
an
stay
invite.
here, or do we need
Yeah,
to?
you can all. Well, then you won't be able to hear Trish, but you can talk here. That's fine too.
And then Andrea, we're also going to put you in room 4. Okay.
Did you already?
I'm going to put Andrea in room 4.
Okay.
I think she's.
Okay, there we go. Thank you.
Perfect. There we go.
All right. Now they should have an invite. All right. I'll be back.
Okay. So I'm going to put. Oh, you got it.
Yeah. I just need to grab the link to room 5. I think this is the one before I leave.
Okay. There we go. I think you guys should have just gotten a room 5 invite.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Was that enough time for everybody? Good. Okay. Did we get some representations down on paper? Some potential board work? Let's do a little bit of sharing. Like, is there somebody from group one that would be willing to like hold up like where you all landed, like what you were thinking about with your representations? And just talk us through a little bit about why you ended up representing the way you did.
Okay, we had a little hard time figuring out how to draw it on the actual paper there, but we did talk about using on the example that you gave with the 3+7, using the last example where the kids would be able to see rather than making a big jump where you know, we would start at 5 and then make the 3 little jumps up to the number 8.
So say a little bit about why that one.
We felt that, especially this being day 14 in September, the beginning of the year, that would be something that the kids would be able to look at and understand what we were doing, rather than just making a big jump from 3 to 5 or from 5 to 3.
So having both the like individual kind of jumps so that if we're still like counting all, we can see where the count all comes from, and the jumps for the add-ins that show like all together it's 7, all together it's 3, or whatever the number is. Okay. I love that connection to like it's the beginning of the school year, and so there are some things that we might need to reinforce. Like we haven't built all of our kind of collective representations, and I don't know for you all like how many other people in your building are doing this work, and whether you can expect kids to like have come with some experience with number corner or these kinds of representations. But you know, even if other people in your building are doing it, kids are coming from other schools and all kinds of things. So making sure that we're, you know, paying attention to that, like beginning of the yearness. How about from group 2?
We were very similar in thinking actually to group 1, and we don't have anything on paper. We just had a discussion between the two of us. And we were talking about the importance of maybe having to show what 5 really looked like on the number line with the individual pieces, just with the population of students that we tend to work with. And so, and this will be a new experience of number corner for this group of second graders, so.
Well, and you know, just thinking about where kids are at in second grade, they're kind of all over the map, you know, with any population, right? Kids are coming in with different understandings, they've used different curricula, there all kinds of things are happening for them. So making sure that we're attending to, you know, what supports they might need to make sense of what we're putting in front of them. And you can think about adding those supports in after too, right? So you might decide that you're going to draw the number line with the starting at 0 and go 5 and then go 3, but then you're going to come back and you're going to say like, where did the 5 come from? And you're going to add in the +1s like as you work along. So think about like the thing that you saw is like the final product, right? But you might think about different orders to do that in depending on where your kids are at. Yeah. Okay. How about room 3? Anything to add?
No, we had a lot of the same ideas. We just talked about, we really liked the first example. So we kind of did that whole making the visual of them seeing the 5 interval, the 3 interval. I kind of color coded the 2 3s to different from the 5 so they could see it opposite each other. And I really liked circling the end or the 8 so that you could see that they ended on the same.
Nice. Okay. Room 4. You have anything else?
We added that we would probably want to get out the Unifix cubes and show that number line representation also.
Yep, so you've got something in parallel with your number line there too, like thinking about that. Yep, very nice. Very nice. So lots of things to think about here with like, how are we like combining and coordinating across representations? So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the second set of activities, which are really similar to the first set. So we're going to take a little bit less time with thinking about you know, like what kinds of solutions kids might come up with, et cetera. And what I really want you to focus on is thinking about and really writing on paper. You don't have to write it in that Google Doc, but really writing like on paper, what would you write on the board? Because one thing to really think about is like that mapping. So if you're going to do what Heather's suggesting, where you've got Unifix cubes and you've got your number line, you've got some choices, right? Like how are you going to record your Unifix cubes on the board, or are you just going to hold them up? If you're putting them next to each other, like are you going to write something that helps kids see, like where are the 3 and the 5 and the Unifix cubes and the number line? Like how are those representations parallel? So just do a little bit of work on that and just focus mostly on that. Like what are you going to record, and less on student strategies, because you've talked about that. Okay, so you can see the set of questions next in your planner. So I will just bump you back out to your breakout rooms, and it should work that you get invited back to them, but like cross our fingers here. Okay, so we're just going to take about 5 minutes to think through that recording for the second part there. All right, welcome back. Okay, so you were working on adding to your recordings and thinking about the kind of annotation that you might add and how you would connect your representations. So I'd love to see if anybody was able to, just jot that down on a piece of paper, what people were working on, or at least talk a little bit about what you were thinking about with those kinds of annotations and connections. Oh, I see Michelle. Will you hold it up a little bit closer? Okay. So I see Michelle's number line representation. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you were thinking about?
Yeah, here, let me get this situated a little bit here. Oops, that's the wrong side.
It's hard, isn't it?
It is tricky. This is like,
Yep. Great. Nice. So talk about your color coding.
so the color coding's to show that both sides, so they can see that the 3 is the same distance on both sides and that the 5 is the same distance on both sides.
And do you want to talk a little bit about the annotation that you have there at the bottom?
Yep, so then the annotation I added at the bottom is that they both have the same sum.
Nice. Nice. Any
And
questions? Okay.
I was just gonna say, and then for the like the top, I have the individual hops kind of like that I would do in black.
Oh, nice.
Because I feel like lots of my students would be counting on.
Yep. Yep. Very nice. So it's the plus ones, the individual hops are for the like starting at 5 and moving up and starting at 3 and moving up. The counting
Yes.
up from the number. Very nice. Okay. Any questions for Michelle, or comments about what you're noticing about her representation? You see Trish saying the color coding really stands out. And I think like really helps highlight for kids about like what's really happening there is the order is changing, but the distance isn't changing, right? So she's nicely like color coded the match. So not just 2 colors for different parts, but really thinking about the 3s being the same and the 5s being the same.
And we also talked in my group, kind of like how you had talked about having the hands that you could kind of like have underneath, and how like that would be a good opportunity that you could actually then switch those hands to show that it's the same. So kind of taking it back to that concrete like objects.
Yeah. Yeah. And thinking about like stuff that you could print out now that's going to help you, do this kind of like quickly in the moment, like printing out like sets of hands and things that you can stick up, printing out like pictures of Udifix cubes that you can like move around, or like whatever the thing is that would make it kind of easier here for you to do that work. And yes, Trish, the line paper is really nice. And so if you're using chart paper in your classroom, grid chart paper or line chart paper are also really nice for putting up your number lines, just because they help you be more equal-ish, right? When you're making those things. Thank you so much, Michelle. Okay. Did anyone else have a chance to sketch theirs out that maybe did something differently from what Michelle has up there that we could take a look at? No? Okay, that's okay. We have one more thing to practice together. Okay, in the final thing that I'm going to ask you to do in your breakout groups is the last task, right, is to take those 2 number line representations and talk the commutative property, right? So it's either introducing or reinforcing a piece of vocabulary, depending on where you feel like your kids are at and what they had the year before or didn't. And I always just sort of assume that they don't have that vocabulary or need some support with that vocabulary. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to pop you back in your breakout groups, and I'm going to ask you to practice talking like you were talking to your kids. So don't like say to one another, so I would say something about how these are the same, right? I want you to actually do the thing. So, hold up whatever representation you're going to use, or point to whatever representation you're going to use, or pretend if you don't have one written down, but actually say the thing that you would say to your kids. Use your gestures, okay? And we're really just going to take a few minutes with this task. So I'm going to give you 4 minutes in your breakout group So really quickly, choose somebody to get started, have them practice saying it, and then if you've got opportunities, have more than one person try it out. Okay? All right, here we go. Okay, so I think we are all back. So you've had an opportunity to really kind of dig deeply into one workout for your upcoming number corners, but we really want to think about how we can transfer this to all of the work that you're doing in recording in your number corners. So what I'm going to ask you to do between now and the next time we see each other on October 1st is to just keep those questions in mind that we started with as you are recording in your number corner activities, right? So do some thinking about like what actually needs to get on the board. Like, so today you had a chance to think about what strategies students would share, how you would record them, but also be thinking about which ones you put up and which ones you don't. You do not have to record every single strategy that a student shares. You can decide. You just want to take some care with making sure that there isn't a group of students that their stuff never makes it on the board, right? And that some kids do, and that you're like overvaluing particular representation. So just try to pay attention to what you're recording, like why you're recording it, and like tracking on who gets up there and who's thinking gets represented, okay? And then just also be thinking about the rest of these questions. So as you're going through your number corner workouts this month, keep these questions in mind. The one you're going to record is the one that we worked on today. So you should have a really good plan for that. You're going to do some number line work before we get there. And then when we come together, we'll be sharing artifacts. But the rest of the group is here. So we're going to transition to whole group.
Hi, everybody. Sorry if I crashed. I just realized that I put my link in the chat and then closed the meeting. So I see some of my people start to trickle in. I was like, here you go, just click over. And then I ended the meeting. That wasn't.
And then you kicked everybody out.
Yeah, not helpful. Sorry.
You're fine. I have before been like, I'll see you later and close the whole meeting when everybody else was going to stay. So you're.
I mean, if that's my worst fumble, then I think it was a successful morning.
Okay. Okay. It looks like people are rolling in. We'll give them just a minute to get here. Okay. I think we have a few more coming over. Okay. All right, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a great time in your grade level work and that you had an opportunity to think about your upcoming number corner activities and all of the recording that you're going to do and got to dig deeply into some content. We wanted to finish up today with just a reminder about what our next steps are. And I know that each of the facilitators talked about this in their session, but I just want to get it up one more time in front of you all. The activity that you planned today, that you worked on today, is up here on the screen. There's a different one for each grade level, except for the 3, 4, 5. I think you only worked on 3, grade 3. This is the activity that we want to make sure that you are taking a picture of your board or pulling your chart paper at the end of it, that you have some kind of record of your recording, because what we're going to do next is we're going to come back in October. We're going to have an artifact club. So we're going to share what was on our board. So I know that today it was a little bit hard because we're using virtual tools and some people were writing on paper and some people were trying to use things online. But for this, we really want everybody to be sharing. And so we want you to be taking a picture of your board or bringing your chart paper or whatever it is. So please make sure that you're like noting on your calendar or your planner, however you organize your instruction. This is the one that we want to make sure that you're getting a picture of. You know, your other option, if you really wanted to go hardcore, would would be just to take a picture every day at the end of your number corner, and then you don't have to forget. You don't have to remember which one it is that you're supposed to be recording. So that is an option too, if you're like me and you're just worried that you're going to forget and you want to make sure that you do it, right? So keep that for our next session. And when we come back together, we're going to go through another cycle. We're going to do some artifact sharing of this one that you practiced today. We're going to do a little bit of new learning, and we're going to do another planning cycle for one in the month of October. Okay. I am going to hand things back over to Trish and Jess, who are going to close us out for the day.
Thank you so much. I spent time in the grade 2 session, and boy, did I love thinking hard about addition with number lines. So thank you all for thinking alongside me. A couple of ending thoughts. One is we would appreciate your feedback on this session. So you can either type in the bit.ly, sure Jess can throw that in chat as well, or use your QR scanner to receive the feedback form. As you're pulling that up and starting to think about those ideas, I will let you know that a few weeks ago, we sent you a message, maybe it was last week. We sent you a message and asked you to complete a Google form that gave us an address. That address is going to be used to ship you some materials for this course. The materials include things like chart paper markers and some chart paper. And then in addition, something to hold your camera or your phone, something to like snap a photo of you. And so those things are going to be coming to you pretty soon. We're going to place an order, but some of you have not filled out that form. So if you when you receive a message from either me or Jess that says, please fill out this form, the quicker you do that, the quicker you'll get the materials. We know that some of you might not have access to chart paper, and it might be helpful for you to have in your classroom or a set of really nice chart paper markers. So we're trying to provide you with those. So that's not in this feedback form, but we will be sending those of you that need to complete that form a message probably before the end of the day today. Jess, do you have anything to add about that? The materials?
No, I think just again, a thank you for taking your time to be here. I had the privilege of sitting in the 3 through 5 session where we also got to think about recording student thinking on some open number lines. And I really appreciated the ways that our friends were getting to engage with one another, especially taking your time at the beginning of the school year like this. So thank you, Teaching Works team, and also thank you, Essentials in Action participants, for being here today.
Yes, thank you, everyone. We know August is a rough time to get this work started, but we hope that this has really kind of like got you pumped for the upcoming school year and have gotten you in the right mindset for what you want to think about with your mathematics teaching, and really appreciate the time that you've committed to this. So please feel free to reach out if you have any questions for any of us. And we really look forward to seeing you in October.